before we get started on today's chapter, I have to share something with you that came to me through the Mysteries of London listening nation. It's fairly well known amongst people who know me or follow me on social media that I love aprons. I love aprons. I wear them all the time. I've even worn them in some of my read-along videos. So I had an apron that was sent to me by someone who's listening along to our Mysteries of London. And guys, it's so funny. Like, I seriously laughed so hard. Like, I still am trying to hold it together before I show this to you. But look at this apron that was sent to me. It says, "Guys, I'm worried about Richard." Which, if you've been here, you know, is the thing I say more often than anything else. Isn't that fantastic? Oh, I'm gonna wear it. I'm gonna wear it all the time. All right, let's get into the chapter now. Today's chapter is chapter 50. We're already at 50. Can you believe that? Chapter 50, The Drugged Wine Glass. Oh no! This means we're going back to Eliza, right? Return we once more to the villa at Upper Clapton. Eliza Sidney's household consisted only of Louisa and a peasant girl of about 15. She no longer kept horses and dogs, as she was compelled by Stevens to do during the time of her disguise, previous to her imprisonment. She therefore required no male retainers, save an old gardener who lived in one of the outhouses. That doesn't mean, like, in America when we think of outhouse, we think of like a outside commode. This is an outbuilding. It's a building that sits out on the property as opposed to being part of the main house. A fictitious letter had caused the faithful Louisa to set out on a long journey, and thus the principal obstacle to the atrocious scheme of the conspirators against Eliza's peace and honor was removed. At 10 o'clock on the evening fixed for the perpetration of the foul deed, the servant girl carried the supper tray to the dining room, where Eliza and Stevens were seated. The domestic spread of the table with the materials for the most sociable of all meals, and having placed 2 decanters upon the hospitable board, withdrew. The countenance of Stevens was particularly calm, considering the part he had undertaken to play towards a woman whose loveliness alone was sufficient to disarm the hand of enmity and obtain the friendship of the most lawless. She had, moreover, already suffered so much through him. She had extended towards him the hand of forgiveness and succor in his dire need, and she possessed the most generous, the most noble, and the most confiding of dispositions. Oh, should not all these considerations have moved that man in her favor? Yeah, so should, like, decent humanity, but... He had received from Eliza the £100 which she had promised him. With that sum he might have found his way to America, and still had a considerable balance in his pocket. But he had determined to add to it the £200 more which Greenwood had promised him. Although calm, he was very thoughtful. "You seem unhappy," said Eliza, observing the pensive air of her guest. "Surely you cannot regret your approaching departure from a land where your safety is so fearfully compromised." "And yet the land of which you speak is the one of my birth, and when once I have left it, I may reckon upon being destined to see it never again." "Yes, it is hard to bid an eternal adieu to one's native country. And yet," continued Eliza, "there is but little to wed the sensitive mind to England. Since my release, I have passed nearly all my time in reading, and I am shocked to perceive, from the information I have gleaned, that England is the only civilized country in the world where death from starvation, literal starvation, is common. Indeed, it is an event of such frequent occurrence that it actually ceases to create astonishment, and almost fails to excite dismay. There must be something radically wrong in that system of society where all the wealth is in the hands of a few, and all the misery is shared by millions." "You would then quit England without much regret?" said Stevens. "For myself," answered Eliza, "I abhor a country in which poverty and destitution prevail to such an extent, while there is so much to spare in the hands of the favored few. I sometimes look forth from the window and survey that mighty city which stretches over plain, hill, and valley, and which is ever extending its mighty arms, as if in time it would embrace the entire island. I gaze upon it at that hour in the morning when the eternal cloud is raised for a little space from its brow, and as I mark the 1,000 spires which point up into the cool, clear sky, I tremble. I feel oppressed as if a weight when I reflect upon the hideous misery, the agonizing woe, the appalling sorrow that want entails upon the sons and daughters of toil in that vast Babylon." "And do you not suppose that same destitution prevails in other great cities of Europe?" "Certainly not. Were a person to die of actual starvation in Paris, the entire population would rise up in dismay. With all our immense and cumbersome machinery of poor laws, there is more real wretchedness in these islands than in any other country upon the face of the earth." "The topic is calculated to distress you, because you enter so deeply and feelingly into it," said Stevens. "Take a glass of wine. It will compose you." Stevens filled 2 glasses with port wine, and almost at the same moment he exclaimed, "What a bad light the lamp gives this evening." Then, in a feigned attempt to raise the wick, he turned the screw the wrong way and extinguished the light. "How awkward I am," he cried, and while Eliza hastened to relight the lamp, he poured a few drops from a vial into one of the glasses of wine. The lamp was lighted once more, and Eliza had resumed her seat. Stevens handed her the fatal glass. "May all health and happiness attend you," he said, "and may God reward you for your generosity towards me." The words did not stick in his throat as he gave them utterance. "And may you prosper in another clime," exclaimed Eliza in a tone which proved that the wish came from the bottom of her heart. She then drank a portion of the wine in her glass. The countenance of Stevens did not change as Eliza imbibed this soporific fluid. He contemplated her beauteous face with as much calmness as if he had just administered to her a potion calculated to embellish her charms and add to her health and happiness. "Either my taste deceives me," said Eliza, placing the half-emptied glass upon the table, "or this wine has some defect which I cannot understand." "No, it is excellent," returned Stevens. "I drink so little that I scarcely know the proper taste," observed Eliza. "The pure spring water is my favorite beverage." "It is considered an unlucky omen to leave unfinished the glass in which you pledge the health of one who is about to traverse the ocean," said Stevens. "In that case," answered Eliza with a smile, "I will relieve your superstitious fears," and she drained her glass. I didn't like Stevens before. Super duper don't like him now. Half an hour passed in conversation, and Eliza felt an irresistible drowsiness coming over her. She endeavored to rally against it, but in vain, and at length she would have fallen from her chair fast asleep had not Stevens rushed forward and caught her. He then rang the bell for the servant. "Your mistress is unwell. She has been complaining all the evening, and she has now fallen into a profound sleep. I will assist you to convey her upstairs to her chamber." Stevens and the servant carried the entranced lady to the boudoir. Having placed her upon the bed, Stevens left the servant to undress her and hastily descended to the hall. He opened the front door with caution and whistled. 2 men emerged from the total darkness without and glided into the hall. Stevens conducted them into a back parlor and gave them the key to lock themselves in. He himself then returned to the dining room, where he tranquilly awaited the arrival of Mr. Greenwood. Midnight was proclaimed at length. A low knock at the front door fell upon Stephen's ear. He hastened to obey the summons and admitted Greenwood into the house. They repaired to the dining room together. "Your wishes have been obeyed in all respects," said Stevens. "Eliza is in your power. The servant has retired to her own room. Give me my reward, for I am in a hurry to leave a dwelling to which my presence will have brought so much misery." And yet this man did not seem appalled nor horror-struck at the infernal nature of the crime for which he thus demanded the recompense. "You will await me here 5 minutes," said Greenwood, and he left the room. At the expiration of that interval he returned, the fire of triumph and lust flashing from his eyes. "It is all well, you have not deceived me," he observed in a tone of joy and exultation. "I have seen her, buried in a profound sleep, stretched like a beauteous statue in her bed. The light of a lamp plays upon her. The atmosphere of her chamber is soft, warm, and perfumed. Such charms are worth a king's purchase. She is mine, she is mine. Here is your reward." Greenwood handed a banknote to his accomplice, or rather instrument in this atrocious proceeding, and Stevens took his departure. But as he passed through the hall, he thrust a letter addressed to Eliza Sidney beneath the carpet that covered the stairs. The moment Greenwood was alone, he paced the dining room for a few minutes to feast his imagination with the pleasures of love and triumph which he now beheld within his reach. "Oh, how I will triumph over the proud and haughty beauty when tomorrow she awakes and finds herself in my arms. She will thrust her hand beneath the pillow for her long, sharp dagger. It will not be there. She will extend her arms toward the bell rope. It will be cut, and then she may rave and weep and reproach and pray, and I shall smile at her grief. Her eyes will be more beauteous when seen through her tears. I shall compel her then to crave to be my mistress, she who refused to be my wife. Oh, what a triumph is within my reach." It's not a great guy. He paused, filled a tumbler half full of wine, and drank the contents at a draught. "Now for my victory, now for the fruits of my intrigue," he resumed. "But let me wait 1 moment longer. Let me ask myself whether it be really true that the lovely Eliza Sidney will shortly bless my arms, that she is at this moment in my power. It is, and I shall now no longer delay the enjoyment of that terrestrial paradise." With these words, he left the dining room and crossed the hall toward the stairs. He was now about to ascend to the boudoir. His foot was upon the first step when he was rudely seized from behind and instantly gagged with a pocket handkerchief. "The 2 guys that Mr. Stevens let in the house. I had wondered who they were. I didn't remember them being part of Greenwood's plan." Turning his head partially round in a vain effort to escape from the powerful grasp in which he found himself, he encountered by the light of the lamp that hung in the hall the glance of the cracksman. "The deuce!" exclaimed the burglar in a low and subdued tone. "This is a rum go, working for you last night and against you tonight, but never mind, we must fulfill our agreement, let it be what it will. I can, however, tell you for your satisfaction that we don't mean to hurt you, so come along quiet and all will be right." "What's the meaning of this, Tom?" said the cracksman's companion, who was no other than the Resurrection Man. "You don't mean to say that you know this fellow?" "He's the one that we did the job for last night on the Richmond Road," answered the cracksman. "He's got plenty of tin," added the Resurrection Man significantly. "Perhaps we can make a better bargain with him than what Stevens has promised us for this night's business." "Yes, but we can't talk here," returned the cracksman, "so come along. I've got my plan all cut and dry." Greenwood conveyed several intimations by means of signs, but he wished to speak. But the two ruffians hurried him out of the house. "Okay, Eliza's safe for the moment, but I'm still not totally sure she's safe. Oh!" They conducted him across the fields to an empty barn at a distance of about a mile from the villa. During the journey thither, they conversed together in a flash language altogether unintelligible to their captive, who was still gagged. A difference of opinion evidently seemed to subsist between the two men relative to the plan which they should pursue with regard to Greenwood, but they at length appeared to agree upon the point. With regard to Greenwood himself, he was a prey to a variety of painful feelings. Disappointment in his designs upon Eliza at the moment when he appeared to stand upon the threshold of success, bitter malignity against Stevens, who had thus duped him, and alarm at the uncertainty of the fate which might await him at the hands of the villains in whose power he thus strangely found himself. The night was pitch dark, but the moment the two ruffians with their captive entered the barn, a lantern in the hands of the cracksman was suddenly made to throw a bright light forwards. The light fell upon the countenance of Stevens, who was standing in the middle of the shed. "All right," said the cracksman. "We pinioned the bird without trouble, and he ain't a strange one, neither." "What, do you mean you know him?" demanded Stevens. "That's neither here nor there," replied the cracksman. "We don't tell secrets out of school, because if we did, there'd be no reliance put in us, and we does a great many pretty little jobs now and then for the swell folks. But here is your bird, delivered at this very spot according to agreement." "Well and good," said Stevens. "Tie him hand and foot." The cracksman and the Resurrection Man instantly obeyed this command. They threw Greenwood upon a truss of straw and fastened his hands together, and then his feet with strong cord. "Here's your reward," said Stevens as soon as this was accomplished. "I have now no more need of your services." He handed them the money as he thus spoke, and having counted it, the two villains bade him good night and left the barn, which was now enveloped in total darkness. "Montague Greenwood," said Stevens as soon as he was alone with his prisoner, "your design upon Eliza Sidney was too atrocious for even a man who has been knocked about in the world, as I have, to permit. You dazzled me with the promise of a reward which my necessities did not permit me to refuse, and you moreover secured my cooperation by means of menaces. But I was determined to defeat your treacherous designs, to avenge myself for the threats which you uttered against me, and to obtain the recompense you had promised me at the same time. How well I have succeeded, you now know. The whole of yesterday morning did I wander amongst the sinks of iniquity and haunts of crime in Clerkenwell and the neighborhood of Saffron Hill. An accident led me into a low public house where I encountered two men who agreed to do my bidding. I tell you all this to convince you that never for a moment was I villain enough, bad though I may be, to pander to infamy of so deep a dye as that which you meditated." Yay! "I have taken measures to acquaint the noble-hearted woman whose ruin you aimed at with the entire history of this transaction, so that she may be upon her guard in future. With reference to you, here I shall leave you. In a few hours the laborers of the farm will no doubt discover you, and you will be restored to liberty when Eliza has awakened from her torpor, and I shall be far beyond the danger of pursuit." Stevens ceased, and taking a long rope from the corner of the barn where he had concealed it, he fastened it to the cord which already confined the hands and feet of Greenwood. He then attached the ends firmly to one of the upright beams of the barn, so as to prevent the captive from crawling away from the place. This precaution being adopted, Stevens took his departure. It would be impossible to describe the rage, vexation, and disappointment which filled Greenwood while Stevens addressed him in the manner described and then bound him with the cord. Yet, during this latter process, he lay perfectly quiet, well aware that any attempted escape on his part would at that moment be totally unavailing. 5 minutes elapsed after Stevens had left the barn, and Greenwood was marveling within himself how long he should have to remain in the unpleasant position, bound with cords and gagged in such a way that he could only breathe through his nostrils, when the sounds of footsteps fell upon his ear, and the light of the cracksman's lantern again flashed through the barn. I thought they might come back. "Well, sir," said the cracksman, "your friend is gone now, so we can have a word or two together. You see, we couldn't help you before, because we was obliged to fulfill our agreement with the man which hired us for the evening. Now it is just likely that you may have to remain here for some hours. If so, if it so be we don't cut you loose. So tell us what you'll give us for cutting them cords." The cracksman removed the gag from Greenwood's mouth as he uttered these words. "I will give you my purse," exclaimed the discomfited financier. "If you will release me this moment, it contains 10 or a dozen guineas." "Thank you kindly," said the cracksman dryly. "We've got that already." Like, you think we didn't already steal that from you? Come on. "We helped ourselves to it as we came across the fields. Don't you see, we always make it a rule to have the pluckings of all pigeons which we're hired to snare. You told us we might take all we found on the swell in the sky blue cab, and that man with the sallow complexion that hired us to do this here business tonight said, 'I will give you £20, and you can help yourselves to all you find about the gentleman you're to operate on.' It's basically the same thing you told us to do to the Count last night. He told us to do to you tonight, so here we go. Call on me tomorrow, and I will give you another £20 to free me from these bonds." "That's only the price of a good corpse," said the Resurrection Man. "Make it 30. "Yes, make it 30, added the cracksman. "Well, I will give you 30 guineas, cried Greenwood, "only delay not another instant. My limbs are stiffening with the cold and with the confinement of these accursed cords." "Let it be 30, then," said the cracksman. "Here, Tony," he added, turning toward his companions. "Hold this here light while I cut the cords, and while I think of it, Mr. Greenwood, I shan't call upon you for the money, but you'll send it to the landlord of the boozing ken where your servant came and found me. Mind it's there by tomorrow night, or else you'll repent it, that's all. Blowed if we haven't had 2 good nights' work on it, Tony. But my eye, wasn't I surprised yesterday when the man with the sallow face which hired us for tonight told me that we was to come to that there villa yonder. And I found out as how it was the same that I'd cracked 3 years ago along with Bill Bolter and Dick Flarer. After all, there's been some curious things about all these matters, particular our having to tackle tonight the very gentleman which we served last night." "Come, don't talk so much, Tom," said the Resurrection Man, "but let's make haste and be off." "There, it's done," exclaimed the cracksman. "The cord is all cut. You can get up, sir." Greenwood arose from the straw upon which he had been lying, and stretched his limbs with as much pleasure as if he had just recovered from a severe cramp. He then reiterated his promise to the 2 men relative to the reward to be paid for the service just rendered him, and having inquired of them which was the nearest way to the West End, he set out upon his long and lonely walk home, depressed, disappointed, and hesitating between plans of vengeance against Stevens and fears of exposure in his own vile and defeated machinations with regard to the beautiful Eliza Sydney. All right, it's the end of the chapter. So, Mr. Stevens saved Eliza. The cracksman and the buffer, no, it was the Resurrection Man, not the buffer, now know that they can play Greenwood here in both directions. They're supposed to get paid by him tomorrow. I have a feeling it's not going to end there. We don't know if Eliza's going to find the letter telling her what had happened and if that's going to help her bring down Mr. Greenwood, but I hope so. All right, we'll see you for the next chapter.